For the sake of this video, religion will be defined by four things: belief, ritual, promise, and consequence. Let's get into it. Those who live in death. Talk about a unique designation. The living undead are not just skeletons devoid of faculty and meaning, for one could argue the contrary. Their motivations are similar to that of the inhabitants of the lands between and all people in our own lives, respectively. According to Baldachin's blessing, the favor allows one to forget any aches and pains. In death, there is only peace, for in death there can be no sensation. This is acquired by embracing fear at the Round Table Hold. This Elden Ring faction, though grim sounding superficially, makes death sound like a virtue. Granted, it is a natural life process that will claim us all eventually. Is it too much to assume that this premise makes encroaching death sound less encroaching? Because who wouldn't try to forget their aches and pains if given the opportunity to do so? We have some basic understanding of what those who live in death are seeking, but what about their origin? Surely that would need to be something that one is aware of if they are to make a decision to subscribe to the undead's beliefs. Those who live in death are products of their environment, literally. During the Night of Black Knives, Black Knife assassins used fragments of the Rune of Death to kill Mohgwyn the Golden. Mohgwyn's essence, his soul essentially, was destroyed while his body lived on, a sort of vesselless husk that would now both grow and corrupt everything it touched.
On a night of wintry fog, the Rune of Death was stolen. And the demigods began to fall, starting with Mohgwyn the Golden. Queen Marika was driven to the brink.
And instead of Mohgwyn's discarded body being reabsorbed into the Erdtree's base and roots, his undead corpse began to infect the tree. That corruption is known as Deathroot, which is what players occasionally encounter as they scour the lands between. For those who have been to the northeastern region of Caelid, you would have found Beast Clergyman Garank, for he dines on that very Deathroot and demands more each time you commune with him. So fundamentally, those who live in death have a belief system characterized by the rejection of the Erdtree's monopoly on life within the lands between. I will discuss the Erdtree in further detail next, but it's essential for you all to understand that the Golden Order and the way of the Erdtree is portrayed as the hallmark source of guidance and structure within Elden Ring's narrative. Due to the rejection of that premise, this particular faction harbors no sympathy for the Erdtree. They are polar opposites. The Tarnished are stripped of the Grace of Gold, and the Grace of Gold is in reference to the radiance of the Erdtree. This implies that the Tarnished subscribe to the beliefs of the Erdtree, and death sorceries and those who live in death have abilities that specifically target the Tarnished, thus establishing that the two factions are of conflicting existences. An argument could be made that the burning of Ghost Flame is a ceremonial practice utilized by those who live in death. Another argument could be made for the fact that the very dispersal of Deathroot is yet another ritualistic practice of this faction. The latter is a process that is founded upon repetition, which also, interestingly enough, is reflective of the very nature of Deathroot and those who live in death. Deathroot contaminates, it renders impure and spreads perpetually, while those who live in death continually revive, if not slain via a holy source. I think it not a coincidence that these two details are examples of repetition and thereby being examples of ritualistic practices. This Elden Ring faction promises a sort of second life and shelter from those who cannot return to the Erdtree, and as consequence for their newly acquired title, they are hunted by Golden Order fundamentalists. Superficially, one would assume this faction of the lands between is very grim, very dire, and perhaps even you would want to avoid. However, I think their motivations are very human-like and actually understandable given the circumstances. The Erdtree is the governing principle in the land, but that does not mean they should be the end-all be-all. That's like saying just because you belong to a certain group, that one group should create the principles that all people should subscribe to. Now, we don't have to agree on anything, but there is more than one perspective. The antithesis of those who live in death is the Erdtree faithful. The Erdtree is the object of worship, while the Golden Order in its fundamentalism is the worshipping body and law. This faction holds the Elden Ring and Queen Marika as flawless and absolute. Any deviation from that belief warrants swift extermination and or exclusion. Golden Order fundamentalism began with Radagon, the second Elden Lord. Well, more like the third, but we'll get into that later. Specifically, this began while he was with Rennala, the Carian queen of Raya Lucaria. During that time, he began research and practice of sorceries and various magics. Subsequently, he became the Elden Lord consort of Queen America and studied incantations and the practice of faith. He acquired expertise in both the disciplines of faith and intelligence, and this predicated the founding of Golden Order fundamentalism. This practice is founded upon two premises: the law of regression and the law of causality. Regression refers to the pull of meaning that all things yearn to eternally converge. Causality is the pull between those meanings, that which links all things in a chain reaction, so think cause and effect with this. As mentioned prior, the fundamentalists of the order and those who live in death are adversarial factions. Because the undead were seen as such an abomination, a blight upon the land essentially, the Golden Order mercilessly hunted them down. A formal practice or ritual of this Elden Ring faction is exemplified by Erdtree burial. Performed in catacombs, this burial describes that upon death, life is returned to the Erdtree. This is seen as a great honor in fundamentalism and is reserved for heroes. Take the Ordovis boss fight. It was located in Ariza's hero's grave, which was an example of Erdtree burial. These graves and burials are typically protected by the Erdtree watchdogs, imps, and various elemental or non-elemental traps. However, it is not uncommon to encounter a more complex enemy. The Golden Order interestingly seems to promise eternal life indirectly by referencing a cycle of rebirth once one dies and is returned to the Erdtree. This cyclical nature earns one a place in the order and cements their standing, unless their death isn't returned to the Erdtree, upon which they'll hunt you mercilessly and they'll kill you. A debate could be had about how this faction is perhaps the most brutal and unforgiving. Consequences consists of being someone who is graceless, or more popularly known as tarnished.
Has the guidance of grace returned to your vision? You do? Wonderful news. Most tarnished are blind to it these days. You are something of a rare breed.
Being born an omen is also reviled within this sect of seeming extremists. Omens are creatures born with horns protruding all over their bodies. Low-class omens are killed, forced into slave labor, and or have their horns cut off. Omens born into stature, such as Mohg or Morgott, are shunned and hidden away to preserve the image of the Golden Order in the Erdtree. This is why Mohg can be found in the subterranean shunning grounds beneath Lindale. Despite being aware of this absolute haunting precedent disguised as honor and integrity, I always seem to do a faith Erdtree style build for each playthrough. These next two factions are not one and the same. In fact, there's a plethora of defining elements that differentiate the two. Let's begin with statement of their respective origins and beliefs. Dragon Communion began as a practice done in spite against Baal the Dread. Dragon Lord Plusudasak, specifically, his followers encouraged the dining on the very dragons they slayed. This is how Drake warriors came to be. The Dragon Cult start bore some similarities to Dragon Communion, since both these two practices featured conflict or war at its onset. The Erdtree and the ancient dragons did not always have the most amicable of dynamics. The walls of the royal capital had been breached only once, and that was by the ancient dragons. The end of the conflict between the dragons and the royal capital was ushered in by Mohgwyn the Golden befriending ancient dragon Fortisaks. As a result, the ancient dragon cult was born. Dragon Communion at its core seems to believe that one becomes what they consume. Those who eat of dragon flesh are doing so in an effort to become more dragon-like. This is a religion of consumption, not necessarily devotion. The ancient dragon cult seems to believe that the ancient dragons are worthy of worship and divine recognition. They existed before the reign of the Erdtree, and due to them predating back before the Golden Order, the cult should be considered and recognized on equal footing as that of the Erdtree. Now, Dragon Communion's ritual is simple: the consumption of draconian flesh. This is typically done in-game by eating dragon hearts at altars of Dragon Communion. In return, the consumer is granted abilities of the slain dragon, seduced with promises of physical characteristics of a dragon, for example scales, and the ability to breathe various elements like fire, ice, or scarlet rot. The ancient dragon cult's ritualistic measures lies in their use of Growlstone for the forgery of weapons and their distinctive red lightning. The ancient dragon cult promises not only strength and ability to wield lightning, but a peaceful coexistence between man and dragon. I do not think that promise is explicitly stated in the game, but it is implied that this is the case because how the dragon cult was started by both a dragon and a god. I think this religion would be a safe bet for most people if they were to choose one of these factions. There are no problems with that of the monopolizing Erdtree, at least superficially, and the cult is strong enough to chart their own path and abide by their own identity as well. Now, those who experience the consequences of Dragon Communion probably do not even possess a sound enough mind to understand the weight of what becomes of them. According to the Magma Breath incantation, those who have performed the Dragon Communion will find their humanity slowly slipping away. Once they fully succumb to their fate, they are left no more than worms that crawl the earth. Now, while the Dragon Cult and the Erdtree are not outright enemies, the cordial nature of their dynamic is not one to be tested. As a consequence, subscribers of the cult are kept at arm's length, so to speak. Historically, the ancient dragons, their practice, and their interaction with the Erdtree faithful would mean war, but all of that bloodshed has culminated in a hybrid-like faction and a strained, distant relationship between the two groups. In short, you could argue that the cult is seen as slight heresy, since another war between the Erdtree and the ancient dragons has yet to take root. Whereas Dragon Communion and the ancient dragon cult have their own unique traditions and practices, the cult has no deviation from the beliefs of the Erdtree. There is no conflicting ideology with that of the Golden Order. This is most likely largely due to the involvement of Godwyn in the cult's founding. Additionally, and while this is purely speculative, it is possible that the Erdtree sees Dragon Communion as a heretical practice, due to communion not being in observance of Erdtree law. Also, the very means by which they commune is pretty objectively barbaric, which in truth would be hypocritical of the Golden Order to show disdain towards that due to their own occasionally monstrous actions. Well, who are we to call it the hypocrisy, right? We might get hunted like those who live in death. Next, we have the Frenzied Flame. This faction interests me the most, and that is because even after doing research on it for this video, I still hold this synonymous with the unknown. I still believe that there is much I don't know about it. Propagated by Shibriri, the most reviled man in history, the Frenzied Flame targets the desperate, the enslaved, and the heartbroken. This is a faction that's predicated upon nihilism, which is essentially the belief that there is no meaning to life at all, like there's no point to anything. So as a result of that belief in the utmost futility, the Frenzied Flame promotes that the world of fire is the only way to encourage unification in an ideal environment. There are several examples of rituals and practices that are exhibited by the Frenzied Flame, first of which could be the fingerprint branding adorned upon armors and weapons. Secondly, there's the offering of Shibriri grapes, a pleasant way of describing the eyeballs of those afflicted with the Frenzied Flame. When pursuing the Frenzied Flame ending in the video game, the Tarnish encounters and embraces the three fingers. That embrace that leaves the character marked and designated a child of the Frenzied Flame can be considered a ritual. Lastly, at least of the rituals I will mention, the weeping of yellow flames from the eyes is another ritual. This also serves as a consequence because it's indicative of the state of madness. In Elden Ring lore, that very madness refers to the total annihilation of oneself and the world. The Frenzied Flame promises the total cessation of suffering, despite it being done through the destruction of existence. As I stated moments ago, it is that very promise that leads to the consequence of madness, a damning of the world, the subconscious, and the body. At times, we all have a little frenzied flame in us, times where we are so angry and just want to see it all burn. Perhaps that is reflective of those who commiserate. Perhaps that is a defining characteristic of pain itself. In any case, the frenzied flame equates incineration with correction. Hidden deep beneath the earth within the Siafa River lies the Mohgwyn Palace, the seat of a burgeoning and blood-soaked religion led by the Omen Prince Mohg. This faction emerged from the shadows of the Golden Order, born from the pain and isolation of the Omen who were cast away into the sewers of the capital. The foundation of their belief is the worship of the Formless Mother, an outer god who resides in a realm of truth and craves wounds above all else. Mohg and his followers believe that blood is the only true medium of divinity, and that through the spilling of accursed blood, they can usher in a new age that transcends the Erdtree's light. The rituals of this cult are visceral and violent, characterized by the stabbing of the Formless Mother's unseen body to draw forth her cursed blood, which ignites into blood flame upon contact with the air. Followers, known as Bloody Fingers, participate in the ritualistic invasion and slaughter of other Tarnished to soak the land in preparation for the coming age. The promise offered to these disciples is a place of high nobility within the Mohgwyn Dynasty, an upcoming empire where the outcasts and the cursed will finally be the rulers of the world. Yet, the consequence for such devotion is a descent into a murderous, insatiable frenzy. Many who follow this path lose their sense of self entirely, becoming a war surgeon or a sanguine noble who exists only to feel the warmth of fresh blood, forever enslaved to a god that demands an endless cycle of mutilation and pain. Lastly, for the sake of this video, the Academy of Raya Lucaria serves as the intellectual and spiritual heart of Liurnia, established long ago to study the mysteries of the cosmos and the amber of the stars known as glintstone. While it may appear as a mere school of magic, it functions as a rigid religious institution founded upon the Carian royal family's lineage and the leadership of Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. Their core belief system centers on the primeval current, a cosmic flow of energy that they believe dictates the fate of all living things through the movement of the stars and the moon. To the scholars of the Academy, glintstone is more than a tool, it is a sacred conduit containing the vital energy of the heavens. Participation in this faith requires rigorous ritualistic devotion, primarily through the pursuit of conspectuses, specialized lineages of study where scholars wear heavy glintstone crowns to focus their minds and signal their devotion to specific cosmic truths. The ultimate promise of Raya Lucaria is enlightenment, the hope that a sorcerer might eventually perceive the primeval current directly and achieve a state of pure cosmic intelligence. However, the consequence for this pursuit is often a total loss of humanity. Those who delve too deep or fail to balance their minds are transformed into graven schools, which are masses of stone faces fused together into a living orb, forever trapped in a state of mindless, eternal observation of the stars they once sought to master. While all these groups may not be considered religions in game, their practices, their observances, their beliefs, all of these are reminiscent of the adjectives of a religious body. Arguments can be made that they all are religions, not just groups or factions who war amongst one another in endless division. I'll be doing a second part to this video. The next one will discuss more Elden Ring factions, which will include Mesmer's Flame, the Hornson, and the Church of the Bud. There are more factions that I haven't even discussed in this video, but I want to touch base on all of the ones that were the most interesting to me when I began my first Elden Ring playthrough. If you like analytical content surrounding PlayStation titles and games, consider subscribe. I'm Harlem, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.